This presentation was recorded on Menang Noongar Budja, and I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of this land, the Menang people of the Noongar Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, to the diversity of First Nations people, and to their ongoing culture and connection to Budja. They were the first in this country to hold information and privacy sacred. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. The content that follows is based on the presenter's experience and understanding, and this video does not constitute legal advice. Organisations that are subject to the Australian privacy principles are encouraged to seek appropriate legal advice to understand their obligations and ensure adherence. Welcome to this video, part 1 of the eSafety for Non-Profit series. In this video we will be talking about information in the context of the types of information that a non-profit organisation might be required to collect, store, maintain, and finally dispose of. So what is information? There are many definitions of information covering many different organisational and informational structures. Within the context of this video, information refers to any data, records, facts, knowledge or opinion that has been gathered during the course of operations of your organisation. Information may refer to people, situations, locations, and may concern customers, members, employees, etc. It may be digital in the form of records stored within an electronic system, or it may be analogue, such as paper-based files. The information your organisation deals with can broadly be broken into 3 categories: public information, identifiable information, and sensitive information. Information in the context of this course is covered in Australia by the Privacy Act 1988, and the contents of these 3 categories is defined within the Act. Public information is mostly defined by its exclusion from the other 2 categories. However, it is broadly considered to be any information that a reasonable person would expect to find from publicly available sources or inquiries. It typically encompasses information that most people would find acceptable to release in public without fear of impacts to their privacy. Public information is generally that which cannot be used to specifically identify or target a particular individual, and as such, public information can also contain de-identified or aggregate information which would otherwise be considered private. For example, schools may collect information about the socio-economic status of parents, which may then be combined to generate broad socio-economic rankings of the entire school catchment. When judging if information is public, consider whether the subject of that information could be identified or harmed by its public release. If in doubt, assume that the information is not public. Identifiable information. Identifiable information, more correctly personally identifiable information, or PII, is information that alone or in combination with other data can be used to identify or target a specific individual. For example, an uncommon full name, an email address, a phone number. These may be adequate to positively identify a specific individual, whereas a common name such as John Smith may be coupled with a suburb location or an employer's name to achieve the same. Credentials are a subset of personally identifiable information that form a stronger link to the individual concerned. These have normally been verified as correct in some other way, and as such are often used as proof of identity with government and financial institutions. Some examples are a driver's license, passport, birth certificate, etc. Finally, sensitive information. Sensitive information is broadly considered to be information that would have a significant impact on an individual if it was made public. Things such as an individual's beliefs, sexuality, and criminal record are often required to be collected as part of an organisation's day-to-day operation, but they need to be treated exceptionally carefully. The Privacy Act 1988 also specifically covers several other sources of sensitive information: credit information, tax file numbers, and employee records. There are some final notes to remember when thinking about information and the Privacy Act. The first is that the definition of personal information within the Act, and by extension sensitive and public information, is deliberately flexible and technology neutral. This means that the Act can stay relevant despite any changes to technology or new sources of information. Secondly, personally identifying information does not need to be true. It can be opinion or deliberate obfuscation, for example, a person's alias. The definition is entirely reliant on whether that information can identify the subject. Thirdly, as mentioned earlier, information may not be personally identifiable until it is combined with other information. For example, the name John Smith is unlikely to identify an individual without adding a location, employer, or phone number. Finally, given the wide-ranging nature of information, it is important that you be cautious in classifying the information that your organisation is responsible for, and it is generally better to take a more conservative attitude in what information you consider public. This brings us to the next part of the video, and a question all non-profit organisations should ask themselves. What are you collecting? What information do you hold about your staff, volunteers, members or clients? And how identifiable or sensitive is it? Let's look at some examples. We'll start by looking at the ATO's website, which defines many types of non-profit organisation. For the first example, let's look at a community kindergarten. A community kindergarten will naturally collect public information such as the catchment area the community kindergarten sits in, the number of children that attend, plus aggregate socio-economic details such as the average income or work types of parents within the catchment area. This information could generally be considered as public, as it is available to anyone by searching online, or would not cause any particular member of the organisation to be identified if it were made public. Identifiable information held by the group may include, for example, information about the children who attend the kindergarten, their names and ages, parents and guardians' email addresses, and working with children ID numbers of the volunteers. Information such as this should be considered personally identifiable, as it can directly identify a person within your organisation. Sensitive information such as medical information might include things like children's allergy information, parents' or guardians' religious beliefs, and tax file numbers of any paid employees. This information should be considered to be extremely sensitive, and therefore is subject to more stringent rules about protection, collection, and disposal. A second example may be a photography club. In this situation, information such as member names may generally be released as public information if permission has been sought to do so, for example within a newsletter or website published by the club. This may also include pictures of the members, again after permission has been sought for this to be released. This may also include results of competitions run by the club. In this situation, it would be worth seeking legal advice as, while released publicly, such information would be also considered personally identifiable, as members can specifically be identified by it. Members' email addresses and phone numbers would definitely be considered personally identifiable information, as would information such as membership status, dues paid, equipment, and skills. Within the context of a photography club, it is unlikely that any sensitive information would need to be maintained. A third example may be a sports club, in this case an under-13s cricket team. Public information may be things like players' first names, which might generally be seen from the sidelines on players' uniforms or on a player roster. Again, as with a photography club, this information has the potential to be personally identifying, however, for example, when combined with the location of the team. The number of members is, however, likely to be public information as well as catchment information, which is often within the name of the team. More personally identifiable information may be required by the club though, such as players' email addresses and phone numbers. The availability of volunteers, if recorded, may also indicate more personal information such as work hours or location. Finally, the team may collect information such as coaching notes about player performances, an interesting example as it may be considered opinion, but is nonetheless personally identifiable. Finally, sensitive information that may be kept by the club may be a history of players' injuries and illnesses, players' blood types, or medication requirements. As a non-profit organisation, it is your responsibility to be aware of what you are collecting and, more importantly, why. This will become especially important in the second part of this video series, leaks, attacks and exfiltration.